You've seen this painting before on t shirts, on posters, on tattoos, in films and magazine spreads. Most people know it as the melting clocks. What few people know is that Salvador Dalí finished it in a single evening in the summer of 1931 while his wife Gala was out at the cinema. And what almost no one knows is that he had been preparing for that evening, for this exact image, his entire life. This is the story of how a piece of overripe camembert cheese gave shape to the most recognizable painting of the 20th century, and of how, in truth, the cheese had almost nothing to do with it. Before we go further, look at the painting. A barren landscape, the sea in the distance, a dead tree growing from a wooden table, 3 watches, somehow soft, draped over branches and stone, a 4th one, golden, swarmed by ants, a single fly on the dial of another, and in the center of the scene, a strange, fleshy form lying on the ground, almost human, almost not. These are the elements. This is what we see. Now, the story everyone tells about this painting is real. One afternoon, Dalí stayed at the table after dinner, alone, looking at the remains of a piece of camembert melting in the heat. The image came to him in seconds, soft watches melting in the sun. But this is only half the story, the half that explains nothing. The other half, the one that actually explains this painting, begins in 1903, a year before Dalí was even born. In 1903, Salvador Dalí's parents lost their first son. His name was Salvador. 9 months later, a second son was born. They gave him the same name. For the rest of his life, the young Dalí was told he was the reincarnation of his dead brother. He grew up under the gaze of a brother he had never known. This left a mark he never escaped, a question that would echo through every painting he ever made. Am I myself, or am I someone else? Is what I see real, or is it the memory of something I have never lived? By the late 1920s, this question had grown into an obsession. Dalí began to paint figures that dissolved, soft, drooping forms that looked like portraits of someone unsure of his own existence. In 1929, he painted The Great Masturbator. At the center of that canvas lies a soft, melting head, eyes closed, sinking into the earth. A self-portrait, but one that seems to be losing its own shape. A year later, in 1930, he formalized a method to access these images. He called it the paranoid critical method. The idea was simple and disturbing. He would deliberately induce hallucinations, then paint what he saw with photographic precision. The difference between a madman and me, he would later say, is that I am not mad. By the summer of 1931, Dalí had the method. He had the obsessions. He had even painted the central figure of his future masterpiece, 2 years before he would paint the masterpiece itself. What he didn't have was a piece of cheese. Cadaqués on the Catalan coast in the summer of 1931. Dalí had a migraine that day. His wife, Gala, decided to go to the cinema without him. He stayed home in the small house overlooking the sea. After dinner, alone in the kitchen, he lingered at the table. On his plate, the remains of the meal, a piece of overripe camembert, slowly losing its shape in the heat. He stared at it. The image came to him in seconds. Watches. Soft, melting, draped over surfaces like cheese. He got up. He walked to his studio, and he picked up a canvas he had started weeks earlier. An empty landscape of Cape Cruis, the rocky coastline of his home. The landscape was already there. The light was already there. The painting was already waiting. In a matter of hours, he added the soft watches. When Gala returned from the cinema, she looked at the canvas for a long moment. Then she said, quietly, "No one who sees this will ever forget it." She was right. But to understand why, we have to actually look at the painting. not at the clocks, at everything else. Here it is, the persistence of memory. The soft watches are what catches the eye. They are the famous part. But look closer. They are also the only element in this painting that came from that summer afternoon. Everything else, Dalí had been carrying with him for years. Look at the landscape on the right. Those golden cliffs, that is Cape Cruis, the coastline where Dalí grew up. The dark shadow falling across the foreground, that is Mount Pani, visible from the windows of his house. The painting is set in the place he loved most in the world. Now look at the figure in the center. It is not an abstract shape. It is Dalí himself, the same melting self-portrait he had painted 2 years earlier in The Great Masturbator. The same closed eye, the same long lashes, the same drooping head dissolving into the ground. And look at the golden watch on the left, covered in ants. The ants are not random. They appear in painting after painting of Dalí's, symbols of decay, of time eating away at flesh. He had been painting them for years before that evening. Even the strange shape at the center. Some scholars trace it back to Hieronymus Bosch and the creatures hidden in the Garden of Earthly Delights, a painter Dalí had studied since he was a boy. So here is the truth of this painting. Dalí did not create it in one evening. He had been painting it his whole life. The question about his dead brother, the obsession with softness, the landscape of his home, the self-portrait, the ants, the method. All of it was already there. All of it was already complete. The camembert was not the inspiration. It was the last missing piece. The painting is small, 24 centimeters by 33, smaller than a sheet of paper. In 1934, 3 years after it was painted, the Museum of Modern Art in New York bought it. Within decades, it had become one of the most reproduced images in the world. But Dalí painted dozens of surrealist works, many of them more complex, more disturbing, technically more ambitious. Why this one? The answer is in everyone who looks at it. Time becoming liquid. Minutes that stretch into hours when you are waiting. Hours that vanish when you are happy. The strange feeling that time does not really hold its shape, that it bends, melts, slips under the weight of memory. Dalí himself returned to this painting 23 years later. In 1954, he painted The Disintegration of the Persistence of Memory. The same scene, now breaking apart, the watches fragmenting into pieces. He wanted to update his masterpiece for the atomic age. But the world never chose that version. The world had already chosen the first one, the small one. There is one more thing. Most people misremember the title of this painting. They call it The Persistence of Time. But Dalí did not call it that. He called it The Persistence of Memory. Time melts, memory stays. That is what every person in the world feels in some moment of their life. And that is why this canvas, 24 centimeters by 33, belongs to all of us. If you made it this far, thank you. It means a lot. If you enjoyed this video, a like helps more than you might think. And if you want to see more videos like this one, subscribing is the best way to make sure you don't miss them. See you in the next one.